When it comes to our soft fruit areas, mid-winter is really the ideal time to be getting everything sorted out, and especially doing some of our pruning. Now, depending on what you're growing and how you're actually growing it will really determine how you're going to handle this. Now, I know that I have quite a lot of my fruit bushes are actually espaliered, and these posts have actually rotted in the ground and they needed to be replaced. So I've had a bit of a debate as to whether to do my pruning first or replace the posts, and I've actually had to do sort of a combination of both depending on what I've got and just how heavy some of that pruning needed to be. I've also, to a certain extent, sort of neglected some of my fruit bushes. 2 years ago there was a lot of flooding. I had to remove and replace my fruit bushes into different areas, and that meant that last year I really didn't want to be pruning them because I really needed them to be re-establishing themselves. So I've got a lot to do. Now, I have my autumn fruiting raspberry canes, and because they are autumn fruiting at this time of year, all I'm going to do is cut those right the way back down to the ground. If you have summer fruiting raspberries, you need to maybe take those down to about a third. Ideally, you would have done that in the summertime when they had just finished fruiting. However, if you haven't, just give them a bit of a tidy up at this point. Don't cut them down to a third because actually you risk losing your harvest this year. I've also got my joster berries and I have got my black currants. Now, the reason I'm mentioning those at the same time is because the way that you deal with them is very, very similar. These fruits actually fruit on what is known as the new wood. Now, new wood is basically wood which is about a year old. So when you are pruning, try to avoid actually cutting any of that new wood, and it's really easy to tell. Just have a look and see the colour of the branches themselves. If you have a fruit bush which you think is a currant and you're not sure whether it is a white currant, a red currant or a black currant, the easy way to tell is with a black currant. If you just rub the actual branches themselves and have a smell, they smell of black currants. They are amazing. In fact, you can even use the leaves on black currants to make things like tea. They are absolutely brilliant. Now, once you've actually cut back, and ideally if you haven't got them espaliered, you want to be creating what is like a goblet shape. So remove the lower branches. If you have any lower branches, what could happen? They could actually ground themselves, and if they ground themselves, they can actually create roots, and then they can create nice free plants, or they could actually create a lot of congestion in your space. The problem with congestion is it's hard to harvest, but you also risk getting some disease. Now, if I look at things like my white currants or my red currants and my gooseberries, these are all fruits which will actually fruit on what is known as the old wood. And the old wood is something which is about 3 years old. And again, just have a look at the colour of those different branches and you'll be able to tell. And again, if they're not espaliered, you're going for that, removing the outside areas which are low down and creating that goblet shape. What you also need to be looking at is if any of your branches are crossing, because if they cross, again, it creates too much congestion, and that in itself can create disease. Now, I know on my white currants, I actually have some coral spot, which is a fungal disease. So I've had to cut off anything which is actually showing that disease, and I'm going to discard them. Now, with my grapes are outside grapes. I have some white ones, I have some red ones. I've completely forgotten after so many years what varieties they are, but they are eaters. I have gone for the espalier, and there's two different ways that you can actually deal with your grapes, whether they are in a greenhouse or they are outside. The first one is actually the Guyot way, where you basically have the main stem of your grapes, and you really need to prune them almost way down to that level. However, I'm actually going with the cordon version of actually espaliering and pruning my grapes, where I have the main trunk and then I have the different branches coming off. It looks absolutely beautiful, and it actually makes it really easy to access the grapes when it comes to harvesting. Now, again, avoiding any of that crossover, because if there is any crossover, it is going to cause disease, and again, it's going to affect your harvest. So I've been nicely espaliering these. I might need to cut them back, and when we come to actually doing our pruning, the number 3 is really important. If we have really big bushes that we need to cut back, we might go down to about a third of the size. So that's certainly something I've had to do with my blackberries, which I've almost had to massacre in order to get into re-espaliering and re-establishing these posts. And again, that 1 in 3 is really important as I prune back inside my fruit bushes, in terms of maybe just taking 1 in 3 out of each of my branches. If we are thinking about actually pruning things like grapes, we're looking for our 3 buds on our branch. And the same if we are potting on anything which has grounded and we've got those 3 new fruit bushes, just trim them back to 3 buds and then put them in a pot ready for when your ground is available to actually put them into the ground. So lots of things to be doing. I've already done my josta berries, I've done my white currants and my raspberries. I've also done my grapes and my blackberries. I just need to get into this fruit cage now and tackle my red currants and my black currants. Wish me luck.